Welcome to the Network for Financial Crime Prevention podcast. Today, we're diving into a topic that has become increasingly important across the broader risk and compliance landscape: trade compliance. My name is Louis Vargas, the founder of the Network for Financial Crime Prevention. If you're not familiar with NFCP, you can learn more about us at nfcp.info, also on our LinkedIn page. We're a global community dedicated to supporting and advancing risk and compliance and financial crime prevention. Today, I am joined by Francisco Montesinos Gutierrez, a seasoned trade compliance professional. Welcome, Francisco.
Thank you very much, Louis, for inviting me.
So in this episode, Francisco will guide us through a structured presentation on the fundamentals of trade compliance, why it matters, and how professionals working in sanctions, AML, fraud, or other areas of risk can build the cross-domain skills needed to navigate this space effectively. Whether you're brand new to trade compliance or looking to deepen your understanding, this session is designed to help you upskill and broaden your perspective. Before I hand over the mic to Francisco, I just want to mention that whatever we discussed today is for educational purposes only and should not be taken as legal advice. So settle in. There's a lot of value packed into this presentation. Let's jump in. So over to you, Francisco.
Thank you, Louis. Well, as you mentioned, the idea today is just to create a forum, or the idea of a forum where we can discuss the main principles of trade compliance, what it's the topic is behind this topic. And as I mentioned, we will be discussing certain areas very briefly. But if in any case any of the audience or yourself have any questions during the podcast or later on, I also sharing my details. We can create always a network, and I believe the more we grow into the topic, the more we learn on the topic, we better can advise to any of the companies we work with. So entering into detail is trade compliance or trade controls, global trade controls. I like to describe this as a science of trading, and I differ normally three different areas, what I call the three different pillars, which I will discuss a little bit later on. But what we're trying to bring here is the concept that we're having three different topics within one science, which are regulated by different regulations, and it has different points of attention. We will be moving through these ones: custom controls, sanctions, export control, probably what people know more about it. And further, we will discuss what are the guidelines of a trade control program and what are the benefits of automating a trade control program and the trainings that this will require. So moving into the topic. So what is trade compliance? As I mentioned already, we have three different pillars, three different domains that are holding the entire trade compliance. Custom controls are probably known within the business, within the supply chain, but not as commonly known for an entire business. The sanctions part, probably this is the most known, or the one that is more familiar to anyone. And finally, the export control, which are I would say, in my opinion, that are the strongest regulations or the let's say the most difficult to digest into a business. And this is basically because of the difficulty to understand what are the major points of attention. As you see here in the picture, we have, and I believe a picture always explains things better, we have all these areas of trade compliance working. So the moment that you have the intention of export any material out of a country, you're going to be already under the scope of the export controls, while entering into contact with any party where you're planning to have a transaction. You also have to have a look to the sanctions part. And when these goods enter into a country of destination, if you as a business are the importer of the records, you're also going to have a look deeply and in detail to custom control. As I mentioned here, the failure to comply with sanctions or export control is a criminal offense. So this is something that we have to take really in consideration. It's really important to make sure that we are not messing in any of these topics. And moving more into detail, I will just mention more in detail what are these pieces or what it's including on the trade compliance pillars. When we're talking into a business, what is trade control? We have to start with different keywords, call them tariff, pretty known and famous word in the recent months, classification, preferential and non-preferential origin. We have to have a really good learning on Incoterms, license management, meaning the ones that are required by the export controls, custom management, if not in a direct relationship, overseeing the activities of a custom brokers. Definitely a good trade compliance programs, and the pillars of trade compliance programs require screening of the parties, valuation. But if we look into detail of each of these pillars,
I'm sorry, Francisco, did you mean to cut off your presentation?
yes.
Okay, cool. Just making sure. All right.
No,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
because I also wanted to have like a part of briefly discussion on the topics, not having everybody reading into the
Perfect.
slide, but also listening what are the keywords and things like this. So I will be moving up and down into the presentation. Also,
Okay,
I mean,
perfect.
I would say if someone have interest, we can always get in contact and I can share the full slide. So that should be fine. Is that okay?
Yeah, yeah.
So let me see where I was. So I was getting through the trade control scopes. What are the key parts of a trade compliant programs? Probably for the business, you will always get attention when talking about tariff, preferential and non-preferential origin. The well use of the Incoterms will always help you to ensure that the supply chain is strong and you are confident that you can have a well control of all these regulations. But let's enter into more into detail. When we were talking about sanctions, I'm just speaking this probably because, as I said, it's the most familiar of the pillars of trade compliance. When we're talking about sanctions, we have to understand that we could be talking about embargoes, that we could be talking about sectorial sanctions, list-based sanctions, and let's be honest, also the company should have their own self-restrictions when taking into account. Sometimes it's more convenient or not to work with a company, not even regarding if they're sanctioned or not, but from other compliance matters. So I would say that a company, a strong trade compliance program in a company will require to have a look into those sanctions, embargoes, sectorial list-based entities or persons, and also to ensure that the company have their own self-restrictions. This will bring serenity for suppliers and customers, and this will also help the company to move forward on international transactions. On the custom control side, we're going to be talking about origin, HS code, harmonized systems, and evaluation, the customs evaluation. And in export controls, the last pillar, we're going to make sure that we always know what will be the end use of the materials that we are trading with, where are we sending it, and who are we sending it. So these also are two keywords, end use and user. This is going to give you recognition as a reliable supplier or customer. So taking in consideration these three different areas, it's going to help us to ensure that the three pillars are granted and the trade compliant program is strong. So moving a little bit forward into the details of each of these areas, and again, probably with a picture, this is the best way for me to learn anything. We have custom controls. As mentioned here, we're going to have different areas to take in consideration, and these will be areas that are regulated by different regulations. Talking when origins, we'll be talking about preferential or non-preferential origin. This will have a lot to do if there is an existing free trade agreement between the countries that you're planning to have a transaction to being able to import any product or to claim any preferential treatment, we will have to have a proper classification of the products. If there's any tariffs or if there's any new tariffs applying at any time, you're going to have a right and a clear classification of all your products, no matter what is the description of your product, the reference, internal reference of your products or the reference of your customer. You will be always asked by the classification of your product. And based on the origin, based on the classification of your product, you will have certain import tariff or import duties. These import duties will have a key value on the custom valuation, which will, moving forward, we have a key impact on the VAT. So if we're having any issue declaring the origin, if we are not truly confident on the classification, we will end up having a problem not only in the import duties classification, in the import duty, for instance, in the VAT, when the goods enter in free circulation. So, I mean, this is an important matter. Normally, everybody talks about what is a sanction party. We have heard this a lot. We, more into the business, we have heard a lot about export controls, but custom controls is a subject to also have quite attention to. A little bit more background on the custom controls. Louis, if you have any questions, just feel free to jump on it. The classification of the products, this is not something really new. This is something that the World Trade Organization, the World Customs Organization, and International Chamber of Commerce has developed. The classification of the harmonization system is present in, I would say, more than 200 countries. Every product is classified between 8 to 10 digits, even 14 sometimes. Every single product is classified. So we're talking about more than 5,000 commodity groups. And the good thing for the people living or working on trade compliance is at least the first 6 digits of every product will be the same, no matter if you are importing or exporting from Europe or US or any other country. These are all coming from these world organizations, and we will only have to always have a look to the last digits, because this will be the particulars or the features of each of the countries. So it's something that requires quite a good knowledge on the products that your company is trading with. Only knowing about the regulations is key. You also need to know about your business. You need to know also about the type of products that you're working with. You also need to know where these ones are manufactured, so you're capable to apply the rules of origin properly. And you always need to be able to help or to support the different areas to ensure that the custom valuation and the further duties are properly calculated. This is what we'll bring to the customs authorities or to any customs key accounts, that your business is serious, that your business is treating every regulation, every part of the areas of custom control serious. Well, that will benefit definitely on the trust to the customs, on the trust towards your customers and third parties. So moving a little bit further, what else do we have? Yeah, probably also interesting to mention that if we are not in line with the custom controls, if we are not classifying our products correctly by default or intermediating with negligence, there will be fines. In this case, this might not get into a crime offense, but will still fines that will affect the business, the profits of the business. So this is something to take into consideration, because the fines can go from a simple 5% of the commercial value to the almost 100% of the commercial value of the items that you're trying to import into a certain country. So it has matters, but you have to have a look to this. Moving forward, probably now the part that is more known, but all the companies, sanctions and embargoes. The geopolitical situation, not entering into any of the things happening today, requires attention into the matters of sanctions and embargoes. So when entering into an international business, trying to allocate your business internationally, there are certain things that are required to have a look, probably a bit more strong than when you have a domestic market. And these are the parties that you're entering with. Not all the countries are seen with the same level of risk, and it's important to also know that there are certain countries that has been restricted to enter into business with. So if we don't know much about this, as I say, a picture of an image can bring always more value. So we have pictures that we've seen in the past that have bring sanctions and embargoes to the table as a main topic. And this requires way more attention than what in principle or from the beginning we could think. If we want to learn more about sanctions, and this is probably a practical part, there are a few links that we can always have a look. One is a site of the European Union, where we can check all the entities and persons that are assigned to a least sanction, or there are certain restrictions to operate with them. And if we want to learn also as well over the US, we can always check the Office of Foreign Affairs and Controls, where there is also a dedicated section where we can learn more about who or which company has been or has been added to any of these designated lists. When talking about sanctions, and I think I already mentioned it, we're going to be talking about embargoes, comprehensive sanctions, probably for everybody know the status of Cuba, Iran, North Korea, certain areas of Ukraine. So in this sense, these, let's say, our countries are extremely, if not fully prohibited to enter into any business with. And when we are talking about sectorial sanctions, you always have to think on certain areas where the access has been limited. We could be talking about areas of financing, technology, military, and we're talking about list-based. These are the designated lists for people, persons, and entities. Depending on the country where we have an access to, there will be some regulations or other enter into application. So we also have to make sure not only the parties that we're talking, but also the regulations that are being covered. So this is also very important when we're discussing sanctions and embargoes. Moving forward, let me see what else we have here. Again, I believe something that can help to understand a little bit more about sanctions and embargoes, and also how all these areas of trade compliance, trade controls are linked between each other. When we are trying to have an international transaction, when we want to enter into a different market in another country, we always have to have a look if any of the sanctions, if any of the entities or parties are sanctions, if there's any embargoes over the countries or destinations that we're planning to have a look, if there's any export control licenses required. So now we're touching export controls, or if any of these sanctions or sanction packages have any restrictions based on HS codes. So now we're also talking about custom controls within sanctions and embargoes. This is a clear example of how all these pillars enter into a connection between each other. So sanctions are commonly associated with target measures. So the sanctions the sanction system has been built to prevent terrorism, governments, or to protect politically exposed persons, entities. We have to, as I mentioned, have a look to high-risk countries. There is already many lists where we can have a look to this. I will also recommend that any company or any trade compliance representative in a company should have their own guidance on sanctions and embargo countries, just to as well ensure that the maturity in this topic is sufficient for the business. But as well, as I already mentioned, we also have to have a look not only to entities, parties, but also fields. There are restrictions in or sanctions applying to goods, to service, to technologies, and these are all part of the sanction programs. So I already been talking a little bit about export controls and what this means. Export controls, and as you can read as well, are designed to prevent unauthorized transfers of goods, technology, and services that could pose security, legal, and reputational risk. Before any transaction, companies should evaluate these for critical dimensions. So this is something that we have to remember. There is, as I say, this is science. There is certain parts that are based on practice, on learning how the supply chain works, but there are other ones that are purely a connection to our regulations. So in this case, there is a good way of ensure the export control. So what is being exported, where is it going, who is the end user, and what would be or how will it be used. So end user, end use, destination, and what is the product. So here again, you need to ensure that you know the classification of your product. Also, if your product, even if it's not controlled by any of these particular lists, if there is a dual use, this means that your product could fit not only for civil use, but also for military use. And in this sense, if your product has any connections with certain areas or countries, you will have to one or two different regulations of export controls. Into, let's say, the western part of the world, where we are here in Europe, or if we're looking to the US or to America, the strongest regulations that we're going to have a look are the dual use regulation in the European Union, but also the export controls in the US. These are parts that we have to make sure that we learn, that we understand, that not every business, not every material will require the same level of export control, but the business requires a strong level of maturity to ensure that we are capable to determine what is an export control product and what is not. Yeah, also leave some reference for let's say not into deep detail, enter a bit more into the knowledge of the different regulations and the main ones regulating, as I said, the Western side. Not more into details. I don't want to get more into the what each of these pillars mean. But for instance, for export controls, we have a background of regulations that has helped to create the current level of export controls that we have today. There are different conventions, agreements, international agreements that have developed across the years the current export controls. So these are the three pillars. This is how they're linked or related between each other, but this is the science. So how we put this in practice? Companies have to attend to these topics. The practice shows that an expertise in trade controls is required for any company with international perspectives, and this require not only an expertise in the company, but that this expertise have the capacity to ensure that the maturity of on this topic for employees is granted, is measured. If there's any requirement for attention, these ones are addressed. This always helps to mitigate risks. So ensuring that this maturity reach to all levels in a business will help to prevent errors, human errors, fines, and probably the most important for a company is reputational imagine picture. It's the benefits for a company. There is an optimization. There is a capacity to ensure that there is no loss, and this on one side are gains. And one of my advice over the years to whenever we conclude a training campaign, we have to ensure that there are processes to ensure there is a constant revision and training over the topics, and also that the trade control representative is open to support and help any part of the business. Sometimes you cannot do this yourself. You really need to count not only with the support of your team members or the other areas, but you also have to have a level of control over the ERP systems of a company. These are the brain and the heart of a company. This will also help you to understand how all the data flows, all the data that end up in an invoice, all the data that end up being presented to the customs authorities, for instance. And in this case, there are many tools today in the market that help you to integrate in a smooth manner all these requirements. So let's say that the technology or the current GTM solutions helps you to ensure that you can have control over the parties that you're dealing with, with the parties that you're dealing with on a 24/7, with the capacity of review them on 24/7. You ensure that all the products are correctly classified. Let's say all these regulations can be supported by the technology today, and there's certain apps that actually improve the capacity to review all these alerts or all these controls. Probably, as I was mentioning earlier, automation trainings are key parts. All these three pillars are to consider whenever we are talking about trade controls. So everything should be included in a trade compliance program. Every company with intention of entering to other markets to have international transactions must have a trade compliance program. And the best way of building is to have a look to all the international or programs, frameworks that different countries, different regions have prepared. They are all or most of them quite aligned between each other. So having a look to all of them, and here I just bring a brief reference. If your business is located in the UK, there will be a UK framework. If your business is within the European Union, if you're located in Germany, there will be a German framework that can be as well checked together with the European one. So whenever you are capable to trace what are the business flows of your company, you will be able to check what are all those frameworks that are required to apply to your business. And from there, you will be always capable to build your trade compliance programs over as I mentioned already, the basis of the three pillars of custom controls, sanctions, embargoes, and export controls. Luis, this is pretty much the picture. of what I was bringing here today. Only thing I can say to you and to the audience that are listening to this podcast today is that the best way of growing in trade control is to grow in your network, to talk. One of the most common features of a trade control representative is, or the most typical picture of a trade compliance representative is a person on a room in front of a computer. To build expertise is something that you have to grow together with other colleagues, with other peers, and enter into a network where you can discuss and bring your doubts, your comments, your most relevant updates on regulations will help you to also achieve a top level on the knowledge of trade controls.
Awesome, Francisco. That was a great overview that you provided. And I also want to let the audience know that your feedback is definitely essential. So if there's anything that you felt was unclear, or maybe you want us to do a deeper dive into, let us know. And we'll work with Francisco to see if we could make that happen in a future podcast or maybe a webinar. But again, feedback is key. So please let us know. And that brings us to the end of today's podcast. A huge thank you to Francisco for sharing his expertise and walking us through the key concepts behind effective trade compliance. I know it was a lot to take in, but a very good overview, like I said, a good summary, and a good place for us to kind of start this conversation. His insights are a powerful reminder that financial crime prevention is a multidisciplinary effort, and understanding the mechanics of trade is essential for anyone working across risk and compliance. If you'd like to learn more about the Network for Financial Crime Prevention, please visit us at nfcp.info. You could also follow us on LinkedIn to explore our resources, training, and community offerings. And as Francisco mentioned, feel free to also connect with him on LinkedIn as well. And as he also mentioned, if anybody's interested in the deck, you could either reach out to me or reach out to him, and we'll see if we could make that happen. As always, thank you for listening. If you found today's session helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and share this with your colleagues who might find it beneficial. And also stay tuned for more conversations aimed at helping you grow in your compliance career. Until next time, stay informed, stay compliant, stay resilient, stay engaged, and be brave. This has been the Network for Financial Crime Prevention podcast. Thank you again, Francisco.